Hello students, this is Miss Whitaker here. I'm going to walk you through a quick example of what you are going to do with your new information about characterization and the notes that we've been taking on our characters Julian and his mother in Everything That Rises Must Converge. So first of all, you are going to choose one of our two characters to write about. Okay, so we've been taking notes on both of our characters, right? We've got Julian, his mother. We have all of these character traits, both direct and indirect, about each character. And you're going to choose one character. So for example, we're just going to start out with Julian. What you are going to do today with this character is you're going to make a list using the 5 traits for indirect characterization. Okay, so indirect characterization. And remember, this is the kind of characterization in which the author shows the reader personality traits of the character. So we're not looking for something specific like Julian is impatient. We're looking for things that tell us how he's impatient, his actions, what he says. We know from his thoughts that he doesn't like his mother's hat, and yet he tells her, I like it, it's fine, just put it on, let's go, we need to go. His actions show that he wants to quickly leave the house and go to the bus stop. So we know that because of his thoughts, what he says and what he does, that he is impatient. The author does not directly say Julian is impatient. So you are going to choose one of these two characters and you are going to look back both at your list of traits and in the story itself, and you're going to make this more specific. So what do we know about the character's looks? What does the character's dress or way of looking tell you about them? What do we know about the character's relationships with other characters? What does Julian think about his mother? What does the mother think about Julian? What do other people think about Julian? What does Julian do that tells us about any of his personality traits? What does he say that tells me about his traits? And what does he think? There are a lot of passages in Everything That Rises Must Converge that tell us what Julian thinks, right? So on a separate sheet of paper from your characterization notes, we are going to put an MLA heading. So upper left-hand corner, your first and last name, your teacher's last name, Whitaker, W-H-I-T-A-K-E-R, your class period, I don't know, for sake of ease I'll say period 2, and the date, which today should be the 11th of October 2017. And for sake of practice, please make sure you write the date in this format: day, month spelled all the way out, and year. So smallest increment of time to the largest increment of time. And this is how I will be expecting you to format all of your headings in your essays and formal writing. All right, so as you can see, you can set up your chart however you want, but this makes the most sense to me. So I have a section for looks, relationships, which I've abbreviated to relations, actions, speech, and thoughts. So what do I know about Julian's looks? Well, for one thing, I know that he is reasonably good looking. Okay, it says on page 38 that Julian's mother thinks that he had turned out so well good looking because her teeth had gone unfilled so that his could be straightened. Okay, so I know that he is good looking, and this is a direct characterization because it says exactly in the text he is good looking. Okay? If it were indirect, it would say something like he had a movie star profile and a chiseled jawline and brown wavy hair and dreamy blue eyes or something like that. And you could infer from that, hey, he's pretty good looking. But it just says he's good looking, and we know this further because his teeth were straightened due to his mom's sacrifice. We also know on page 37 that he dresses nicely when he goes out with his mother. He suddenly unloosened his tie and pulled it off and put it in his pocket. And then his mother accuses him of deliberately embarrassing her and says he looks like a thug. And then he puts his tie back on and says, "Restored to my class." So I know that he dresses well in a tie, at least, and probably looks nice, which shows me that his character, he's middle class, but he's not proud of his status because he tries to take his tie off. And we don't really know much more about Julian's looks. You will get probably a few more bits of detail from Julian's mother. So now let's move on to relationships. Already I'm starting to wish I'd made my relationship section larger because there is so much in the relationship between Julian and his mother and Julian and other people in the story that tell us about his character. So for starters, let's start on the first page, page 34. It says that Julian did not like to consider all that she did for him, but every Wednesday night he braced himself and took her. So he braced himself. He's steeling himself to be strong to do something he doesn't want to. So we know he doesn't like to think of everything that his mom has done for him. And I found this on page 34, so I'm just going to mark that so I don't forget it later. And we also know that everything that gave her pleasure was small and depressed him. And it's like his mother is a little girl that he had to take to town. So I'm just going to jot that down in my notes really quickly. All right, hopefully you can read my chicken scratch. So I've got my textual evidence. He doesn't like to think of all that his mom has done for him. This tells me he's ungrateful. He doesn't like what she likes. This tells me he's maybe a little rebellious. He thinks that his mother is childish, which tells me he thinks he's superior to her. So all of my evidence from the text shows his relationship with his mother. This evidence also shows me parts of his personality traits. So with relationships, I'm not asking you to say specifically, does he have a good relationship with his mom or not? I'm asking you to tell me, what does his relationship with his mom tell you about him, right? We know that their relationship is not great. All right, we also know that he visualized a place where the nearest neighbors would be 3 miles away on either side. This tells me that he is kind of like a hermit. He does not like other people. He's very antisocial. So I can include that here as well. Okay. All right, we're going to move on to actions. So one thing that Julian does on page 36 is when he got on a bus by himself, so this is a callback to another action that he's done, he made it a point to sit down beside a Negro in reparation, as it were, for his mother's sins. So we know that he goes out of his way to make up for his mother's racism. This tells me that he thinks he's open-minded. Whether he is or isn't the point right now. We know that he thinks he's open-minded. And he is open to social change. Okay, unlike his mother. This also tells us that he is, again, kind of rebellious. He does this, he sits next to people of color, and he wants to make friends with people of color, not because he wants to get to know their culture or to get to know these new people as individuals, but because he knows it will make his mother upset. So these actions show that he's rebellious and maybe even a little bit racist in his own way, because he's choosing who he sits by and associates with based on their skin color simply to make his mother mad. Not to get to know them better as people, not to treat them as people, but to treat them as pawns in his own little fantasy world. Okay? So another action that Julian does is what am I looking for? On page 38, we see that Julian withdraws into the inner compartment of his mind where he spends most of his time. And he does this so that he doesn't have to deal with his mother or with things around him. So we know that he's introverted, and we know that he's antisocial, and he kind of has his own little fantasy world. So he withdraws into a mental bubble, and I found this information on page 38, so I'll just record that so I can find it easily later. And now let's move on to speech. What does Julian say in the story, and what does this tell us about his character? Well, we know that he is impatient because he tells his mother, let's go, on page 34. And he tells her, it's all right, it's all right. And then when she's talking about going back to her house, he tells her, you're not going to take it back. I like it, even though we know he doesn't. He's lying to her. And he tells his mom to shut up and enjoy it. Okay? So tells mom to shut up and lies about liking her hat. And this is on page 35.